Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome into the WST Free Agency special. My name is Connor Hrabchak. Today, I'm joined by Lyss Houde. You see us every single Sunday morning at 9 a.m., WST Sunday Live. But we didn't go live last Sunday, coming out of the draft, going into free agency. So we thought, hey, why not go live on Canada Day? And we want to start today's show by wishing you all a very happy Canada Day. Hope you're all enjoying your day off. It's a beautiful day in the city of Winnipeg. We were down at development camp this morning. Lyss and I will talk about that in just a minute here. But obviously, the big story today is free agency. We're going to cover it all. Some Jets players are already on the move out of Winnipeg. So we're going to break it all down here today. Lyss, how are you doing today? Nice to see you down at development camp this morning.
Yeah, I'm doing well. It was a fun morning. I always love that first week of July for that exact reason. The kids at Dev Camp are so much fun. They're having a blast out there, and it's nice to see, Mike Keane, Jimmy Roy, them all getting the guys all out there, the new faces, the new-ish faces. It's always funny how, being second year, your D+1 year guy, you all of a sudden have all of this wiggle room to be a bit more of a veteran presence into something like Dev Camp because of these guys who were literally drafted by the Winnipeg Jets 2 days ago. So it was nice to kind of see them all together. Lots of good players in this group. We have no holdouts like a Rutger McGroody situation like last year. Everyone who's supposed to be there is there. So it was nice to see them all. And it was a good morning seeing everybody down there.
I wonder how the jerseys are fitting for everyone down at development camp this morning. No, I'll stop. It's 1:03. It's too early for this kind of stuff. But yeah, we have so many, NHL wide news stories to get to, but not as many Jets news. Obviously, free agency is not a day where the Winnipeg Jets are going to be the Vegas Golden Knights, clearing out cap space and getting Mitch Marner. They're not that team. They haven't been that team. But they're more of a team that's going to add some depth pieces, and they do have unrestricted free agents. They have the top unrestricted free agent, Nikolai Ehlers, who has yet to sign with any team yet. We're hearing reports that things are going to take a while. He's going to take the time with his decision. But Brandon Tanev, most recently, just before we hit go here, is off to the Utah Mammoth. 3 years, $2.5 million per season. Lyss, we'll just start with this one because it's the most recent one. It's the one that just happened before we hit go live. Your thoughts on Brandon Tanev leaving the Winnipeg Jets off to Utah, division rival. Jets traded for him at the deadline, and it worked in some areas, but not enough production for me.
No, for sure. I think people like the idea of Brandon Tanev more than they like the actuality of Brandon Tanev. And I think that, listen, I have no beef with the player, and it was nice to bring him back. And it always feels good as a fan of a team or as management of a team or whatever to have someone who had an experience with the team before want to come back and have that same experience again. Brandon Tanev, one of just a few players that has come back to the Winnipeg Jets after a stint away. So it was nice to have him back. But again, 3 years, $2.5 million. This is the most July 1st, 2025 deal of all time. Utility guys in the bottom of the lineup are starting to get a teeny tiny bit of term and some AAVs that, we're going to take a look at and go, no, thank you. I'm okay on that one. So listen, it's pretty inoffensive, and any deal under $3 to $4 million right now, honestly, especially on such a short term like that, pretty nothing burger to me. I'm in terms of the fit in Utah, I think Brandon Tanev bring some of that energy, as we know that's the type of player he is, that goes well with some of those players in Utah. And then Utah's got a bunch of young guys that kind of get sprinkled into their lineup here and there, that maybe there could be some fun chaos down low in the lineup there with Brandon Tanev. I'm not sure, but so long, farewell. Nice to see you. And, I don't think this is something that moves the needle too much for the Winnipeg Jets.
Yep. And I'm with you on that. And, there's one thing that I feel always happens on free agency day, and that is, people get upset that the Jets don't make any moves. Seeing some of the contracts handed out today, Lyss, I'm okay with it. Like Brock Besser, I think for $7.25 by 7 years, I think if the Winnipeg Jets were in on that, to produce or replace, if Nikolai Ehlers is walking, some of that scoring in the top six, totally okay with that. But there are some contracts being handed out over these past couple of days that are very, very high. And I know the cap is rising, but some of them, the cap rising won't bail them out. And look,
I have one for you that's that has nothing to do with the cap rising. It looks like just a few seconds ago, Dylan Coghlan is on his way to Vegas. So long farewell to another Winnipeg Jets fringe guy that listen, again, you want to talk about deals moving the needle? League minimum for Dylan Coghlan in Vegas makes about sense, and all the best to him there. But that's another Winnipeg Jet pending UFA there. That's off the board.
Yeah, and the Jets had 9 defensemen under contract, assuming Dylan Samberg signs his RFA contract. So there wasn't much room for a Dylan Coghlan, who played with the Moose last year and was great with the Moose, but I'm sure he wants, maybe a bit of a clearer path to the NHL, and he's going to Vegas. Okay, interesting. Lyss, where do you want to start when it comes to the signings of the last couple of days? Should we talk about Mitch Marner? Because he's the big one. He was the number 1 free agent going to Vegas. Evan Bouchard signed a big deal. Brad Marchand, Aaron Ekblad, Florida kept the band together. Where do you want to start with?
Oh my God. I know. Well, there's so much
24
that we
hours
can talk about. Yeah. Maybe we could start with some of the biggest ticket ones, the biggest AAV ones, and talk about some of those. That Evan Bouchard deal, like you mentioned, Mitch Marner, like you mentioned, and maybe some of the lower AAV ones, as in the Aaron Ekblad deal that was astonishingly low. Maybe let's start by talking about some of the players that we think got reasonable deals, because there are some outliers that I think are steals of contracts, insane contracts. A couple guys that come to mind immediately when I think of league-wide guys who are making pretty fair deals. Evan Bouchard, I think that's a great deal for, what the player is worth and the term there as well. Mitch Marner, I think that's exactly what that player should be making. That nice 8-year deal for him is something that not everyone was expecting necessarily based on what was being reported, but I think an 8x12 makes a ton of sense for him. And then Brock Besser also signing today. That's another guy who I think people were worried was maybe going to get an overpay, but I really like that deal for both him and for Vancouver. I think that he's a player who certainly has flaws, but a lot of utility as well. So I think that 7-year deal that he signed just earlier today is a pretty sweet deal. What do you think about those?
Yeah, I think the Brock Besser one is the most shocking to me, because a lot of the reports we were hearing is that he was out of Vancouver. Vancouver had about $9.5 million in cap space with P.S. Suter and Brock Besser left to sign. So they still have to sign P.S. Suter, and they, have significantly less than $9 million. They have about $2.5 million left. So that's going to be really interesting to see there, but obviously good for them to keep a top 6 scorer around. The thing that has fascinated me the most, and viewing everything from a Jets lens, let's bring it back to the Jets here, is the defenseman contracts that have been handed out in the same range that we're kind of ballparking Dylan Samberg's extension. So just to read off a few, Alex Romanov got 8 by 6.25 per season. And when that one got signed, I tweeted out, that sound you hear is Dylan Samberg and his agent cheering. That Romanov just got 6.25. Like, you'd think that, if Romanov's going to get 6.25, a guy like Dylan Samberg would as well. Then Aaron Ekblad took a massive discount to stay in Florida, 8 years, $6.1 million. So you're thinking, oh, maybe the market's not that high. And then Ivan Provorov re-signs with the Columbus Blue Jackets at $8.5 million for the next 7 years. That's a very, very high price tag. Martin Feravari, RFA, left shot defenseman for the Washington Capitals, 7 years, $6 million. So
Vlad Gavrikov, 7
by 7. So I think a lot of these contracts, none of them have fallen under $6 million, even Aaron Ekblad taking a massive discount. So what I think we're going to see, earlier in the season, maybe we were thinking Dylan Samberg maybe takes a $5 million, $5.5 million. Marcus Pettersson on the Canucks, very similar player to Dylan Samberg. He took 5.5. I don't think there's any way Dylan Samberg goes under $6 million in AAV, whatever the term is, Lyss. I
already didn't think that he was going to go under, but this is just, I think, solidified that. And this is something that, listen, what are we, 10 minutes into this stream here? It's a rant that I was going to save until maybe a little bit later, especially if we're sitting twiddling our thumbs looking for Mason Appleton's 4x4. But I think that it's really difficult. There are lots of folks in the chat here. First of all, thank you so much for being here with us on this Tuesday fun special afternoons. We usually spend our Sunday mornings together. Maybe I'm a bit more energized than normal because we have the afternoon and much more caffeine under our belts here. So
Still got
there you go. Perfect. No, but so many people are talking about, okay, the disappointment, and whether it's the Jets management or talking about different players that have been overpaid, underpaid, and comparisons floating around in the chat. This is something that I'm really struggling with, because humans
Mhm.
love to compare. Comparison is the easiest way to comprehend things, to grasp things. We don't work in raw numbers, we work in relativity. And this is just a situation that we're walking into right now that is so unlike anything that we've ever seen before. We can't really compare dollar for dollar deals that are being signed right now to anything that has been signed in the last few years. This whole concept of this cap rising in the way that it's supposed to over the next few years, cap space is not going to be the same asset that it was before. It's still an asset, don't get me wrong, but it's going to be looked at a little bit differently. I was talking to Connor about this at Dev Camp this morning, where for so long we've been kind of galaxy braining talented players. Well, it's like, okay, but what matters more, the talent alone or the output per dollar? And you could lean on a little bit more of the latter. The output per dollar is the most important thing. You have guys like Connor McDavid, where it's like, obviously he makes a lot of money, but the output per dollar is still extremely high. But then you get to that middle of the lineup superstar sort of thing that's like, okay, is this guy worth his contract? Now you just need the good players. And it's going to be really fascinating to see how this works out over the next couple of years, and how some of these deals that were signed between 2020 and 2025 suddenly become the most efficient deals in the league, and how maybe some more trades are going to start to be put in place and stuff. Because yeah, this free agent market is looking pretty bleak, and these deals, while they do look pretty crazy right now, a lot of them, other than maybe the Ivan Provorov deal, probably aren't going to age as bad as we think they are, because we're thinking in terms of right now, which is no longer the reality.
Yeah, it's the balance of like sticker shock versus the rising cap might bail some of these teams out. You know, like Ivan Provorov, if the cap wasn't rising as much as it is, there's no way he's an $8.5 million defenseman, but he's going to get that. But at the same time, while there is sticker shock there, Columbus 4 years from now, if Ivan Provorov falls off, it won't be as bad of a hit as it usually would have been under the original cap. So it's the balance of how much sticker shock do you take with these contracts versus the rising salary cap. And look, going into last night, Chris Johnston tweeted out there are going to be some crazy deals signed today. I thought we were headed towards a 2016 NBA free agency-esque day. So far, we've gotten a few of those deals where the cap is rising. Teams have money to spend, so they're just spending. And a team like the San Jose Sharks, they just extended William Eklund at $5.6 million. They're still $15 million shy of getting to the cap floor.
Insane.
And they need to spend a lot of money. And then you get into the fact that the free agent class is not that good, right? That's another thing. Like Nikolai Ehlers is at the top now. Mikhail Granlund is still available. There's still some names still available.
Jack Roslovic.
It falls off pretty quick. And a lot of players have signed today as well. So it's going to be interesting to see, especially as names continue to go, how much those teams that almost need to spend to get to the cap floor, how much are they willing to overpay? And I know this is such like a nondescript thing, but sometimes in NHL franchise mode, you'll just give a guy $1 million or $10 million for 1 year and just get to the cap floor if your team is so bad. What if a team does that? What if a team just gives a depth player $5 million just to get to the cap floor? It's going to be really interesting to see, because a team like the Jets, they haven't signed any of their RFAs yet, and they have roughly $26 million in cap space. Nikolai Ehlers obviously is the number one free agent on the market right now, but looks like signs are pointing to him taking the day to make his decision. And then you have guys like Gabe Vilardi, you have guys like Dylan Sandberg that are going to get signed. Morgan Barron's an RFA as well. So how are the Jets going to use this cap space? Are they going to be a cap team? If they're going to be a cap team, you know, they're running out of options to do so, at least in the free agency market, which, like I said off the top, a place that they're not usually heavy in on anyways. Lyss, were there any other quick word on Florida keeping the band together and going 6 years with Brad Marchand, who's 37 years old? Now, one thing that interests me about this is the Leafs were trying to do this a few years ago with Chris Tanev, or maybe it was last year. They were trying to give him like 6-7 years, and he's he's 35, 36 years old as well. And the NHL almost like told them you can't do that, or they're watching to see if they're just going to like put them on LTIR for the last couple of years. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, Florida doesn't care. They're going for the Stanley Cup the next couple of years, but years from now, when Brad Marchand is on LTIR for the last 2 years of this deal, if the NHL decides to punish them, I know that's so far away, but what are the percentage chances Brad Marchand plays all 6 years of this contract list? Like,
is there a number that's smaller than 0? Like, come on.
No,
yeah, no, I totally agree with you. No, 100%. But Florida, look, I think it's fascinating. And I can't remember what the tweet was that I saw, but like it's all of Brad Marchand, Aaron Ekblad, Sam Bennett, Matthew Tkachuk, Sasha Barkov, and there's a couple other pieces, Sam Reinhart, a couple pieces there, all signed through 2030. This is a team, like, I'm sorry, we talk about the highs and lows of high school football. We talk about the highs and lows of hockey teams. If you can win this, we can compare this to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers if we want to go this far. Winnipeg Blue Bombers make 5 consecutive Grey Cups. This is Winnipeg we're talking about. I get that, but Bombers are not going to have the attendance problems that they had years ago for the next 5 years, whatever, because this is a team that has proven that they can win and all these different things where people are bought in. They know what it's like to watch a successful team, whatever. You can buy yourself a lot of, wiggle room and you can give yourself a long leash when you win championships. If the Florida Panthers go on to actually become a dynasty, because I do not consider them to be one at this point, make a 4th consecutive cup final, maybe sprinkle in another cup or 2 in this window before 2030, they do not care what happens after that. You can do a nice hard reset. And listen, I'm not going to go off on too long of a tangent here, but we're seeing a lot of teams kind of make some sharp turns here and there where this can be like the NBA too, where you can make a couple of quick deals that really resets the whole chart for the course of how your team is projected to go, what your trajectory is looking like in a rebuild. And so these deals, controlling your assets is the biggest thing. This is a Thomas Drancism from the PDO cast, signing guys and locking them up. You can move that. You can move the certainty if you need to move that, but the uncertainty is what's going to really end up shafting teams. And so I think they have all these guys tied up. They want to play for this team. They want to play for Bill Zito. They want to play for Paul Maurice. They want to play for a Sasha Barkov captained team. They want to play in Florida. They want a chance to win another Stanley Cup. How great would it be to be part of an actual dynasty? I fault no one for taking these discounts. They've made the money they need to make, and they have a fantastic hockey team with a continually fantastic future with how many other guys are now locked up.
Yeah, and it's way easier to do that and convince Aaron Ekblad to take probably like $2 million annually, less than what he would have gotten on the open market, coming off of back-to-back Stanley Cups. Like, Aaron Ekblad has now tasted what it's like to win Stanley Cups, and he wants to do that for the rest of his career. And 8x6, like, that is not, yes, he's leaving money on the table, but that is still life-changing money for Aaron Ekblad. And then Brad Marchand, like, no team was probably comfortable offering him 6 years at 5.25, let alone like 4 years. So Florida did what they had to do. And look, to get players to take discounts to play for them is a product of having a good organization, having a team that wins in the playoffs. And I think that's the biggest reason why you see these players take discounts. As we're not going to talk about taxes. I don't think that has anything to do with it. I think the back-to-back Stanley Cups is the biggest reason Aaron Ekblad is taking a big discount than what he would have gotten on the open market. Lyss, we don't have any Winnipeg Jets news rolling in as of late, but we did have something this morning with Winnipeg Jets players skating around on a sheet of ice. We were down at development camp, down at the Hockey for All Center. There were a lot of people there, a lot of people wearing Canada gear, as it is Happy Canada Day. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here live on YouTube at 1 o'clock. And yeah, it was great to see some of the prospects pictured here on the screen. You see Zach Naring, Braden Yeager, Jacob Julian, Alphonse Frey is to the right there talking to Zach Naring, and a lot of other prospects lists. So down at development camp this morning, what were you can't really take much away from the actual on ice stuff from development camp, but nice to see everyone down at the Hockey for All Center this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of the young pieces at the Winnipeg Jets here, especially in that forward group, I'm going to circle them a little bit more because I think that there are a lot of pieces to really like with this group. Listen, I really like some of the guys that have been to Dev Camp in the past. This morning we got to speak with Kevin He, Jacob Julian, Alphonse Frey, a couple of guys who are our recent draft picks of the Winnipeg Jets. It was really nice to see them again. I know Alphonse Frey is a defenseman, but he was smiling as always and had lots of nice things to say about his time here. But there's a lot to like about this forward group. Connor and I were, it's hard to miss Kevin He when he's out there kind of giving it 112% at all times when he's in on the drills. Kieran Walton looked like he has something to prove out there. Like he's again, hard to miss just because of the nature of his frame and his stature, if I may. But he's a player that I really like the jump in his step, and it was nice to see him there. The big names in Colby Barlow and Braden Yeager also look like they're having a great time, and it was nice to see them out kind of giving it their all in the drills as well. And my, project, my high on of the day is Zach Naring. He's also been to Dev Camp before, and he's someone who is one to watch, in my opinion. I've been a bit higher on him in the last year or so than I was when they initially drafted him. And I think that there might be something to like in that later round pick there. But it was nice to see Jacob Kluche, the latest round pick of the Winnipeg Jets from this draft here that was with the Saginaw Spirit team that has a lot of good players. So he had a fun season as well. And then seeing Owen Martin, there's lots of kids who are, out of that camp that are new to us. So it was nice to see so many different people there today.
Yeah, it really was. Nice to see Nick Lynham, who we're both friends with, down at Hockey for All Center this morning as well, taking in the prospect camp. And I wasn't there for media lists because I had to leave early, had to make sure, everything was ready to go for today's show. You were a little bit closer, so you could get home in time, but you stuck around for the media portion. Who did you hear from after the fact? How excited are these guys to be here? Are they being here with all of their, peers, all of their draftees over this week from now until Friday here in Winnipeg?
Yeah, so the three folks who did backdrop this morning, first was Kevin He. Kevin
Nice.
he's such a pleasure to talk to. He's always excited to be there. Very, very polite kid, very nice. And so he spoke fondly of his season that he had this year. As many people know, with the Niagara Ice Dogs, he was named captain this year, which was a huge honor for him. And his team made the playoffs, which was a big success for them because they haven't been too successful as a group in the last few seasons. And Kevin, he went on an absolute personal heater for a good chunk of the season. Tons of points from that player, absolute career best from him. And so he, learned a lot from his time, and he's excited to spend some time this offseason really working out and getting into the best shape possible for the upcoming season. So he was excited to chat with us. Talked to Jacob Julian, recent Memorial Cup winner with the London Knights as well. Another kid who is not his first rodeo here with Dev Camp, but very excited to take kind of what he learned from back-to-back Memorial Cup appearances. Obviously, we know that the Saginaw Spirit upset them in the Memorial Cup final 2 years ago as the host team when the London Knights had won the OHL, but this year they kind of came back and were vindicated. It was really funny, Jacob's answer. I can't remember if it was Dave Manuk or Jamie Thomas who asked him a question basically about kind of how it felt to go into this season after having lost the Memorial Cup. And he was like, well, it was terrible. It was so bad. Like it was so awful. Like there's nothing that feels worse than that. So having a strong season for him, he was really proud of his defensive strides that he's taken in his game. It was a bit of a down year in terms of production for him, but he was really happy with the progress he made on the other side of the puck, which was really nice to hear from him on that. And then the last player we heard from was Alphonse Frey, who's, very excited to be back and, speaks highly of his experience with Jimmy Roy and Mike Keane in the lot. And so it was nice to hear from him about how excited he is to have a couple more Swedes in the organization. And he said he had a good season. He felt that his defensive game as well improved. He is well aware that he's a strong offensive player, good skater. So he was excited to share with us that his defensive game has improved and he's really liking the trajectory he's on. He said it was a learning season for him. He said that a couple of times to us. So excited to see what comes next from him as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will just say your note on Kevin He, and you were hearing from him. I tweeted out the number one thing that, nobody told Kevin He that this is just supposed to be a fun, summer skate. His motor and his work ethic is cranked to 100 every single time he steps on the ice. This is now multiple development camps, last year's training camp, even with the Winnipeg Jets against, NHL players. He was outworking some of them in training camp. Like, you brought up a little bit of Brandon Tanev in his game in terms of the motor. We've seen Brandon Tanev now in two different stints here in Winnipeg and how he's always going and always playing with like at 10 out of 10 pace. Kevin He is the same way. Whether it's development camp in the summer, whether it's training camp in the fall, whether it's games with the Niagara Ice Dogs, he is going 100% every single shift, every single game. And that is awesome. That's what you want out of, these young prospects is you want them to care. You want them to be going 100% all the time. So watching development camp today, seeing him, take pucks away from other prospects and crash into the boards and fall over a few times. You brought up the Brandon Tanev thing. And I was like, yeah, he's definitely got a little bit of Brandon Tanev to him in terms of the work ethic. We'll talk more about development camp later on, but we did just get not Jets news, but Jets adjacent news. Nate Schmidt, Lyss, 3 years, $3.5 million AAV with the Utah Mammoths. So that's now Brandon Tanev and Nate Schmidt, both former Jets players who are off to Utah. And Schmidt, I see a lot of people in chat very happy for him. Just won the Stanley Cup with the Florida Panthers. He was the first player to get handed the cup because he's a veteran defenseman, been around the league a while, had some chances to win cups earlier on in his career, and finally got one. Everyone was very happy for him. And as you can see here, the chat is very happy for Nate Schmidt. 3 years, $3.5 million in Utah list.
Yeah, no, that it 100% is. You're happy for Nate Schmidt, and look, that's a little bit of the Winnipeg Jets model at work. It's kind of weird to be on the other end of it, where we've seen so many times where players have come to Winnipeg, played out whatever contract it is they're on, whether it's what they signed with the Jets or they were traded on a deal, and then they leave Winnipeg and hit the open market and make a lot more money. You know, the Andrew Kopps of the world, the Ben Sherratts of the world, the Tyler Myers of the world. We've seen it happen many times with players coming here and turning into some sort of, you know, minor reclamation project where a lot of them are good hockey players, but they end up becoming overpaid because they looked a little bit better during their stints with the Winnipeg Jets than maybe they actually were. Nate Schmidt bought out by the Winnipeg Jets. We're all well aware of this. And Florida was a bit of a reclamation project, and they've turned into this a little bit where they have become the signer of guys who didn't get qualified offers, and they've become the place where they can take a chance on guys and really turn them into something. It's too bad, you know, it would have been like an absolute masterclass if they had been able to do something where they sign him as opposed to letting him walk on the open market, or they can do a trade, whatever, to see that going from signing a bought out player on a tried out contract and seeing what he can become now. But it's nice for the player. It's really great. He got his cup and now he's getting his bag. That's all you can ask for. That's the dream.
Yeah. And Florida, you know, a lot of what we talked about coming out of the Stanley Cup final is like, okay, what can the Winnipeg Jets learn from the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers? And the Edmonton Oilers is tough because it's like, well, just draft the best, most talented hockey player maybe in the history of the league, and then draft another guy who's also top 3 in the league. You can't really learn much from that. But at the same time, if you look at the Florida Panthers, what they're doing around the edges of their lineup, you know, picking up a Nate Schmidt who was bought out, and again, didn't really have many issues with Nate Schmidt's play when he was here. It was more just the contract. He was making $5.9 million a season to be on the Jets' third pair and in and out of the lineup, not even really playing in the playoffs. But to pick him up at $800,000 for the Florida Panthers and have that kind of production out of your third pair, taking those like low risk, dart throws, if you will, or flyers on these players that haven't been extended qualifying offers or have been bought out or have been cast aside by teams but have high upside. That is what I think a lot of teams can learn from the Florida Panthers. Not, necessarily people are still mad about the taxes and mad about, players taking hometown discounts to play in Florida. But the truth is on the outside of their lineup, they're taking these low risk, dart throws and they're hitting on these players. Carter Verhaeghe was cast aside. Gustav Forsling was a waiver claim. And those players, Gustav Forsling was a waiver claim and they signed him before he broke out. So there's nothing to do with taxes. They signed him to a deal that was fair and had sticker shock at the time, actually. So, and now he's maybe one of the best defensive defensemen in the league. So there's a lot there for Florida that the Winnipeg Jets can learn from, especially at the depths of their lineup. And Lyss, is there anything else you want to say on, Nate Schmidt, maybe Utah here? They got Peterka, now they're getting Tanev, now they're getting Schmidt. They're using up a lot of their cap space. I know they came into free agency with a lot of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, it's really interesting actually when we mentioned that, and maybe that tees us up for a little bit of a bigger conversation about people are talking about Nikolai Ehlers obviously in the chat. It's pretty hard not to, but if you're a team like Utah, which I think is a really good example that we can talk about here, where there is going to be a Nikolai Ehlers sweepstakes and only one team is going to win. Mitch Marner is off the board, and we know that Brock Besser's off the board, a bunch of different things across the board, where you could talk about a player like Nikolai Ehlers and say he was a fit for Utah, say he was a fit for the Mammoth, whatever. If you bid and bid and bid, and all of a sudden the price gets a little bit higher, we talk about this at the trade deadline every year. Okay, I would prefer an overpay than walking away with nothing at all. And so I think Utah, by making some signings here and by bringing in some guys, this is a team that to me, I think is understanding the fact that they aren't like going to be getting the big ticket item here. So they're going to have to figure out some other ways to get around it, because even if you overpay for Nikolai Ehlers, even if you were to pay Nikolai Ehlers $11 million, you still get a Nikolai Ehlers in your lineup. The alternative is not having a high impact top 6 piece. You're screwed. So I think that that's going to be a really interesting thing as we start to see more teams make some more signings here. I think they're realizing that they need stuff. And, if you can't get the guy that you want, you also can't get nothing. You need to find a secret third thing. And that's citing the Nate Schmitts of the world and stuff like that to try and just get some more pieces in.
Yeah. And I think that's a good transition, what you were saying there about Nikolai Ehlers, because it's going to be, even if Brock Besser came to Winnipeg, it's going to be very difficult to replace Nikolai Ehlers with a free agent in Winnipeg. It's going to be even more difficult to replace him via trade, because Nikolai Ehlers is a very unique player with a very unique skill set, and he brings that dynamic speed and skill element to the Jets' top six that if he walks in free agency, again, no news yet, he hasn't made his decision, it looks likely that he will walk. How will the Winnipeg Jets look to replace him? So, Lyss, a lot of the names have flown off the board already, but there are still some players available. Let me ask you about Andrew Mangiapane, because Murat Atesh from The Athletic has, brought his name up a few times on the program with Hustler. He's still a player who has yet to sign with any team yet, and is, a middle six, solid forechecking type who kind of got buried in a deep forward core in Washington, and maybe there's a little bit more offensive upside there. Again, Andrew Mangiapane, not a Nikolai Ehlers replacement, but for a player that's a middle six, forechecking type with a bit of an offensive punch, what would you think about the Winnipeg Jets maybe targeting an Andrew Mangiapane?
That's the sort of thing that I really like. I like that idea. Listen, that's a guy who was really well liked when he was in Calgary in terms of every team wants an Andrew Mangiapane. And right. He's one of the ones I find a little bit fascinating in that he went to that Washington Capitals team and didn't become the best version of himself, whereas everybody else on that team did. We saw what happened with Dylan Strome and Anthony Beauvillier and Pierre-Luc Dubois. Like, they all became better versions of themselves. And him, I think he was okay. But at the end of the day, the Winnipeg Jets still need to show up in October with a competitive hockey team to go and try and defend that President's Trophy and take more strides. And even if you miss out on some of these bigger pieces, even if Nikolai Ehlers is gone, you still have a hockey game to play tomorrow. So what are we going to do about that? And I think Andrew Mangiapane fits that bill of a guy who has the potential to have some more impact, because we could talk about the Jacob Peltiers and the different guys of the world who are some maybe high flying possible guys you could buy low on and maybe sell high later. But Mangiapane is the type of guy that I think really needs to, prove it in his next deal, because he had some high praise earlier, and then now people aren't so sure about him. But he's a guy I think that could come into the Winnipeg Jets team here and listen, I think he brings a lot of that bite that a lot of people like when it comes to players. He's tough to play against, good defensively, all those different mantras that I think people really like. And he could be a versatile piece that actually makes an impact in this Winnipeg Jets team, as opposed to, more fourth line fringe guys that are going to be available for free pretty soon.
Totally. Yeah. There's also, I'll just run through a bit of the list here, because again, like I said, the Winnipeg Jets aren't going to be in on maybe some of the higher end players, but you could see them be in on some of these depth players like an Andrew Mangiapane who could pop in a middle six. And then again, like, there's also the lane of the Nino Niederreiter and Vladimir Meskovs of the world. Well, those were acquired via trade with some day two picks. Those are also the kind of trades that, the Winnipeg Jets can make to restock. Again, I'm not saying the Winnipeg Jets can replace Nikolai Ehlers. I'm not saying they will. Andrew Mangiapane is not a Nikolai Ehlers replacement, but you've got to find a way to, give the middle six a little bit of life with Nikolai Ehlers potentially leaving. So real quick, let me run through a bit of the list here. We've got Mikael Granlund, Nikolai Ehlers. Those are, high-end forwards that are still available. Pius Suter on Vancouver, Evgeny Danilov from Dallas, Jack Roslovic reuniting with the Winnipeg Jets, maybe? No. Jonathan Drouin, James Van Riemsdyk just signed, actually.
One by one, I think I saw somewhere.
Jeff Skinner from Edmonton. He was, in and out of the lineup during the playoffs there. Victor Olofsson from Vegas, Andrew Mangiapane from Washington, Gustav Nyquist from Minnesota. These are all players that are Anthony Beauvillier from Washington, players that are, fit that kind of middle six caliber, kind of lower end that the Winnipeg Jets can target. But Lyss, that's not the only way. There's also players that haven't received qualifying offers. So these are younger players, RFAs, who, have been cast aside for whatever reason from their teams. And this is, one of the areas that the Winnipeg Jets will be looking at to try and improve their team. And there are some players here, we have a list, who were not extended qualifying offers, have played in the NHL, and have shown upside at times that the Winnipeg Jets or any team could take a look to sign, and maybe as a little bit of a high upside swing. Philip Tomasino from Pittsburgh, Jacob Peltier from Philly, Zach Jones is a left shot defenseman from the Rangers, Arthur Kaliev, also from the Rangers. If you'll remember, his season ended on a hit from Luke Schenn late in Luke Schenn's Winnipeg Jets debut. that's a little bit of a deep cut there. But Raphael Harvey-Pinard, Montreal, and Philip Kurashev from Chicago. We wrote down Bernard Docker, a right shot defenseman, but he was signed. He was signed before or after we went live. But all of those names lists, I throw out there to ask you, should the Winnipeg Jets be in the qualifying offer, or the players that weren't extended qualifying offers, should they be in that market to try and restock their forward depth a little bit?
Yeah, listen, I think forward talent is going to become something that's really at a premium here in the next little bit. There are lots of good players in the NHL, don't get me wrong, but high-end talent is hard to come by, and with 32 different teams that want high-end talent. And this is something that I was listening to a podcast they were talking about, where I feel like a lot of teams are getting out of their rebuild phase over this next stretch. You know, we have the San Jose Sharks, the Montreal Canadiens, teams like that are not wanting to be total tank jobs anymore. And even the Chicago Blackhawks, you could put in that category, where they're really not wanting to have another terrible season here. There are a lot of teams that want to be good, other than like the Pittsburgh Penguins and yeah, I guess kind of the Chicago Blackhawks and maybe the Anaheim Ducks, but even now that they hired Coach Q, maybe it's different. I don't know. Not a lot of teams want to be in the toilet terrible bad this year. So good players are going to be hard to find. And I feel like that's a very, very blanket statement. But some of these players that we mentioned here, specifically the Arthur Kaliev and Jacob Pelche in particular, those are guys who, in my opinion, still have upside, untapped upside. Guys who this is going to be a free piece of advice here for everybody. If you become an NHL GM one day, anyone who was an under 27-year-old player who played for the New York Rangers and was in their system from let's say 2017 until present, if they had potential at one point, buy low, because there is potential for them to have that realized still, because of how that team develops their prospects and just some of the struggles that young players have in that organization. So guys like Kaliev and Zach Jones, I'm like, okay, maybe there's some potential here. Keandre Miller traded today. Bet you he's going to go pop off in Carolina. I almost guarantee it. And I think everyone would agree with me on that. So I think these are the types of guys that, listen, maybe they don't pan out into anything. They didn't even receive QOs from their teams. We understand that there is not the bar for what this list is pretty low, but there are some of these guys that still have the potential to be higher impact NHL pieces, specifically Kaliev and Pelche. I think the odds of them being better than a non-QO receiving forward in the next little bit is probably pretty high.
That's the thing. I like you use the word buy low. That's what you're doing when you go to these players who haven't received qualifying offers, right? That their value is at the lowest it's really ever been. And you're offering them maybe a kind of a second lease on their career in a sense, because if one team doesn't want them, well, then it's okay. What's the issue? Philip Tomasino was traded from the Predators to the Penguins last year. And in a bit of an elevated role with the Penguins, he ended 50 games played, 11 goals, 23 points, and they didn't qualify. He's a 23-year-old right shot forward. We've talked a little bit about how the Winnipeg Jets don't have any right shot forwards. That is something that would be interesting. And Jude here is saying, I like Pelche too. That's another one. He was traded from the Calgary Flames to the Philadelphia Flyers. Didn't really work out with Philly. 25 games played, 3 goals, 8 points. But we know how Philly can be with prospects. We know how they can be with forwards in general. If John Tortorella of the past didn't like a player, he just didn't play. So I don't know. These are the low risk signings that the Winnipeg Jets can make. And it's players that have been cast aside, and they're not, the biggest free agent available. It's not Mitch Marner. It's not unrealistic for these guys to be Winnipeg Jets. And I think it's a market that they should be in on, Lyss.
No, 100%. Because, the alternative is, you say, okay, let's look at Zach Jones. Obviously, the Winnipeg Jets don't need defensemen, but you can look at that. You say, oh, maybe we could sign that, low deal, low AAV, whatever. Or you could sign Cody Ceci to a 4 times $4.5 million contract. That's why I'm leaning a little bit more towards some of these, maybe off the Eric Robertson list, as Thomas Strand says on the PDO cast, of the guys who are, hey, maybe there's some potential to be more than what they are right now. And listen, Cody Ceci, 4 years at $4.5 million. These are the types of deals that, listen, it's not going to end up being that bad, but for the Edmonton Oilers, for the Los Angeles Kings, having to go through the Edmonton Oilers again soon with Edmondson and Ceci on that blue line. Oh my gosh, I am not looking forward to watching that unfold. But that's a pretty big deal that we're taking a look at right now. Holy smokes.
Yeah, no kidding.
And Matt Hyman says in the chat, and I saw this too, Winnipeg Jets legend Anton Forsberg also goes to the Kings. So there we go.
Wow, nice. I will say Matt is like our chat insider right now. He's got all the signings. Brian Dumoulin.
Oh yeah, and Brian Dumoulin too.
Yeah, Kings are spending money, and the Kings is interesting. He signed Cody Ceci to this $4.5 million AAV deal, but they traded Jordan Spence like a day ago, who's like a 23-year-old right shot defenseman, young,
good
up
at
and
hockey
coming.
also.
Yeah, so that's an interesting move for them. A few people in the chat are asking, disgruntled wheat here saying JT isn't 2C, Pia Suter. So just taking a look here at Vancouver's Puckpedia page, they have $500,000 in cap space, and they have 22 players signed to their active roster. So if they're looking to bring Pia Suter back, they're going to have to move some money out. But Lyss, Pia Suter is one of the top forwards on the board right now. He had 46 points.
What a world we live in.
I know. He has 46 total points in 81 games last year, 25 goals for the Vancouver Canucks, playing a big role for them. What do you think about him coming to Winnipeg, or the Winnipeg Jets looking at him as a center target, which, is an area of interest, not only because you're not, there's uncertainty with Jonathan Toews, but also Adam Lowry, who's likely to miss at least the first month, maybe first 2 months of the season as he recovers from hip surgery. What about Pia Suter? What does that name do?
I was a Pia Suter truther during COVID when he played for the Chicago Blackhawks. As many people know, I grew up a Chicago Blackhawks fan. That was my team. That was kind of my secondary team. So I have always been like a Pia Suter guy. I think he's sick. But again, that's the sort of deal that to me provides a little bit more, like at least there's something there, and I think that's what the Winnipeg Jets have to take a look at. Bona fide fourth line guys are just not going to cut it in terms of making an impact here, because then what you have to do is that Morgan Barron suddenly has to be like a lock in your middle six, and that can't happen. That's a guy that needs to be able to move down if he's able to move down or whatever. Right. We saw with Mason Appleton last year, where when he's a fixture in that third line, it doesn't give you a lot of mobility to bring in higher impact pieces to maybe try and raise the ceiling of what you're able to do. I'm all about raising the ceiling for the Winnipeg Jets. That's what I'm looking at in terms of this July 1st and any trades that come in subsequent days. I think that aiming for those high risk, high reward players is kind of what you have to do, because the baseline of where you're at is not going to be good enough. You're going to need to do something else. So I'm interested in those sorts of players that, listen, I'm not saying Suter's a perfect hockey player and, it took him a while to even make it to the show, but I think that there's some potential there. I like the guy. I always have. Yeah,
absolutely. And yeah, I mean, like I said, we're at 1:43 p.m. Central Time. And the top couple of forwards on the board here are obviously Nikolai Ehlers, who everyone in chat is saying they obviously want him to come back. That would leave a massive hole in the Jets lineup. Then Mikhail Granlund, Pia Suter, and then after that, you get into Evgeny Dadonov, Jack Roslovic, Jonathan Drouin, players who find middle six players.
Sorry. I texted you about this a little while ago. Jonathan Drouin also fits the bill to me in terms of like raising the ceiling. Nice. At his worst, he's a non-factor and like would not contribute to the Winnipeg Jets. We know there's been some issues. He's, bounced around a bit in his career and stuff like that. And maybe a bit of McKinnon Merchant, who knows, also played with Nikolai Ehlers and Jr. Fun fact for everybody here. But that's a guy, if you want to talk about like raising the ceiling, there's potential for that to be someone who actually can come in and legitimately play middle 6 minutes for the Winnipeg Jets in a good way.
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, maybe he is a McKinnon Merchant, but last year, 43 games played, 37 total points. Again, that is coming from the top line. Let him be a Mark Scheifele
Merchant then. I don't care if you're going to get that many points out of it.
It's a player that can make an impact in the middle six and can play with skilled players, can play with, on the top line with a Nathan McKinnon, which the Winnipeg Jets don't have, but they can play with a Cole Perfetti, Jonathan Drouin can, and at least produce a little bit of offense. Again, I feel like this is Moneyball. We can't bring back Ehlers. Okay, we got to replace him in the aggregate. We can't bring back Ehlers. We're trying to piece together ways to bring back Nikolai Ehlers.
But it's true. That's absolutely true. Because the thing is, if you lose a 70-point player or whatever, if all of a sudden your bottom six guys, if you can increase their output by 10 points apiece, you can manage that. And you bring in a guy who's like, there are ways to upgrade from within and try and move things around and whatnot. And I think what you have to look at is not, someone playing in the middle six for the Winnipeg Jets, the second line for the Winnipeg Jets, because that's where the big circle is. We know that we don't know if Jonathan Toews is going to be the solution at 2C. We know that Nikolai Ehlers probably isn't going to be on this team in October. Guys who are actually providing a skill set and a toolbox of second line type skills, not, well, he's an NHL player and there are 8 forwards on this roster who are worse than him, so therefore he must play second line. That's not the answer. That's not what we're looking for. Someone who actually has complementary skills and things that they can do to sort of contribute to, whether it's playing with Cole Perfetti or finding a way to get more out of other guys in the roster. That's what we're looking for here.
Well, Lyss, unfortunately, the Jonathan Drouin dream is dead. As soon as we started talking about him,
oh my God,
he is going to the New York Islanders.
Man,
2 years,
that's a sweet
million. But like,
I like that.
That's the range that we're talking about here with Andrew Mangiapane and Jonathan Drouin and all of and P.S. Suter, even in that $4 to $5 million range, which the Winnipeg Jets absolutely have the space for. They also have the space for Nikolai Ehlers to come back. And that's the range where you look to replace a Nikolai Ehlers in the aggregate, like I said, Brad Pitt, Moneyball type of thing. But I don't know. It's running dry here in terms of options for the Winnipeg Jets to do that. If it's not a replacement from within, and if it's not Nikita Chibrikov, and it's not Nino Niederreiter sliding up to the second line and playing top 6 minutes, it's going to be interesting. So, Lyss, I do want to talk a little bit more about Nikolai Ehlers specifically. As the day goes on, would you agree that the chances of him returning to Winnipeg are going down as he hears offers from other teams?
Yeah, I'm feeling no more or less.
Nothing? No more or less?
Like, I don't think that each hour that passes, I'm less and less convinced that he'll sign here. I think that, say going into today, I was at I think there's a 15% chance that Nikolai Ehlers is a Winnipeg Jet.
Interesting.
In a week from now, I think I'm probably still at the same thing. I think, there are lots of teams that could offer him the world for sure, and lots of teams that will and should offer him the world. I totally get that, but he knows what's on the table here in Winnipeg, and it's always, the devil you know versus the devil you don't. There are things that, people in the chat are mentioning, the quote that came out in terms of wants to play somewhere warmer, wants to play in a market that's less intense, or whatever the quotes or whatever the realities are for Nikolai Ehlers. Every market has their downside. So, he might be humming and hawing over different things that are available. And at the end of the day, he'll just kind of make the choice that makes the most sense for him. And Winnipeg is still fully an option in terms of that. We know that the team themselves has not closed the door, and they won't close the door. It'll ultimately be the player's decision. So we'll see what happens. I think I'm probably still sitting at about, 10%. We'll go with 10%. 15 is a bit high. There's a 10% chance that Nikolai Ehlers is a Winnipeg Jet in a week.
Okay. Interesting. I do think, the Nikolai Ehlers saga won't drag out longer than a day or two. I think by the end of the week, by Friday's development camp, I think we will know.
And he's definitely listening in, right? That's the whole thing. We talked about the tampering jokes and everything like that. This is a player that really cares about, he's moving his life to maybe a new country, definitely a new city if he were to move somewhere else. So seeing what they have available, learning about their staff and their practice facilities and what they value and what his role is going to look like and so many different things like that. He's going to take some time, as he is entitled to do.
Yeah. And, some of the teams that we have heard are in on it. Comment here saying to Tampa. Tampa is one of the teams. Apparently Carolina is the place that I think is the most likely. Washington is another team
still on the table
that
is,
apparently looking to put a package together for Nikolai Ehlers. Let us know in the chat, everyone who has joined us here at 1 p.m. on a nice Canada Day Tuesday here in Winnipeg. We really appreciate it. Huss and Remo will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. We didn't want to change too much of people's schedules. So again, 1 o'clock, we're here. Thank you everyone for joining us. If you're here with us live on YouTube, let us know in the chat below. If it's not Winnipeg for Nikolai Ehlers, where do you think he ends up? My take is Carolina. They have tons of cap space. They just signed Logan Stankoven actually to a very,
massive,
very good contract.
8x6, yeah.
Yeah, an 8x6. And they have $26 million in current cap space. So that is a lot of money to work with. That might actually be before the Stankoven deal. So 20 million-ish in cap space for the Carolina Hurricanes, who have most of their roster filled out as well. They need to bring back Brent Burns, but I can't imagine that contract being too crazy if he even is coming back. He is getting up there in age. I think it's going to be Carolina. I think that's a warmer climate. It's a less intense climate if you're looking at, them versus the Rangers or whatever. And it's a team where he's going to get opportunity. He would play on the top line, I think, with Sebastian Aho and Seth Jarvis and Logan Stankoven.
Talk
maybe
about great
in the top
players
six,
to play with. They have lots of those versatile, actual fun top six pieces that you can mix and match and turn it into a puzzle and play around with that to get some good matches there.
Jet-centric here saying Ehlers to the Mammoth. If he went in division to a young and up-and-coming team, I think that would really sting.
This is the thing. I totally was on board with that, whatever. But with some of the moves they made, getting Peterka in, and obviously I know they have to trade away Josh Doan and Kesselring for that. But like I think they're probably out on the Marner and Ehlers sweepstakes and started making proactive decisions and moves to try and fill gaps to raise the floor of what their team is capable of doing.
Okay. Yeah. So what's your official prediction for Nikolai Ehlers?
I agree with Leslie here. I think Carolina is too nice of a fit to pass up.
Well, Leslie agrees with me. So this is bad content. We're all agreeing here.
Okay. No, Washington. Reunite him with Pierre Dubois. I'm Team Washington. No, I think if it's not Carolina, maybe I'm leaning Washington. I'm really not sure. Or you never know, someone totally off the board could take a swing and it could work out. But I think I'm gonna lean. Or hey, you know what? I don't know exactly what their situation is looking right now, but a QMJHL reunion on the island. Let's go New York Islanders. I don't know.
New York Islanders. Wow.
Let's go.
See, this is the kind of thing when you say New York Islanders, I think back to all of the reports that we've heard where it's like, well, Nikolai Ehlers says he wants to win. And it's like the New York Islanders not going to make the playoffs next year. They just signed
Alex Romanov. Come on.
They just signed Romanov. But they did just have, an absolute money draft class and took Matthew Schaefer, number 1 overall, and had 2 other first round picks. So that's a team where he could go play with Matthew Barzal for a couple of years, Bo Horvat, and just light it up until the youth movement comes in and they eventually be a good team. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. We're on Ehlers' watch, and it's really coming down to the wire here. It looks like he's going to be like the last one to sign as the day moves on here. Lyss, before we get to our segments, which people who join every day at 1 might not know what our segments are. But before we get to that, we did miss. Yeah, this might be new for some people. What I want to talk about is because we didn't go live on Sunday morning, which we always do. If I know a lot of people in chat today are always there Sunday at 9 a.m. and we appreciate that. But Lyss and I are usually live right here on WST every Sunday, 9 a.m. One thing I want to ask you, because we didn't go live Sunday, we missed the draft and we missed the Winnipeg Jets re-signing Hayden Fleury, 2 years, $950,000. Again, this is not Nikolai Ehlers re-signing, but it is a player, a pending UFA, re-upping with the Winnipeg Jets for multiple years. Let's maybe start with the signing of Hayden Fleury, if you have any thoughts on that. And then we can move on to the draft. And I know we talked a little bit about it with development camp, but we'll talk a little bit more about the Jets first rounder, Sacha Boumedienne. But Hayden Fleury.
Yeah, no, I think it's a nice deal. That's what we said. I think the 8th defenseman that they now have under contract, excluding Dylan Samberg, who
which will be 9.
Does not have a contract. We know that, but the RFA protection is looking pretty sweet there. Good for him. I like Hayden Fleury. I think that especially, we can romanticize Game 7 against the St. Louis Blues all we want, but we know that this player is capable of playing NHL minutes. And this is a guy who, again, a year ago was not really on any of our radars. And I don't know where he was at on the Winnipeg Jets radar, but then was a late signing getting closer to camp. And a lot of people thought he was going to be a Manitoba Moose. And then, injuries happen, life happens, all these different things. And I think we ended up seeing more from Hayden Fleury than any of us were expecting to, and giving him a nice little bit of term for a very, very inoffensive AAV, I think is great. Another guy who's from somewhere a little bit closer to here. So, has lots of family in the nearby area, all that sort of stuff. I am happy for the guy. If it means that he's, locked in as a bottom pairing defenseman for the Winnipeg Jets, maybe I have some more questions. But we said the same thing about Logan Stanley, and then it became clear that he wasn't locked into his spot down there. So I think performance, is the biggest factor here. And if he can perform at the level that we've seen that he's able to do, that's wonderful and good for him. Seems like a nice enough guy. And, I'm happy that he's going to be sticking around. Good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's a player that has bounced around a little bit in his career as well. and can provide steady third pairing minutes. And again, for what was it, 950,000 for the next 2 years? Like, I think that's fine. You see other teams today, especially paying third pair defensemen, north of 4 million. And they're obviously hoping for more out of those third pairings. But Hayden Fleury, along with Luke Shen or Colin Miller or whoever it was on his wing, proved that he can be a capable depth defenseman. 6'4", 207 pounds, had 7 assists in 36 games or 39 games, last season. And everyone remembers him for his Game 7 performance list against the St. Louis Blues when he played over 30 minutes. Josh Morrissey went down early, and he had such an incredible game, along with Neil Pionk and Cole Perfetti, 2 goals. And looking back on that Game 7 is fun. And Hayden Fleury, had the slap pass down to Kyle Connor on the OT winner after, the puck went back up to the point. He played such an incredible Game 7 that I think everyone is okay with him coming back, because they don't remember what happened during the regular season, if it was bad or good. That Game 7 was just such a strong performance from Hayden Fleury stepping up for Josh Morrissey, that for 2 years at 950,000, this isn't franchise altering, but it's a good depth move. It's the Jets have 9 or 8 before Dylan Sandberg. We keep saying that, but will be 9 defensemen under contract, and all of them have shown at times that they can be capable depth defenders, except for maybe Ville Heinola, who counts in that mix. But
okay,
he hasn't been given
Why
the runway.
drive-by?
Okay.
Come on,
he hasn't been given the runway. Maybe. I mean, we could talk more about Ville. I know you're
no,
always.
We're not talking about Ville Heinola. We are not.
Shouldn't have brought him up. But anyways, let's move on. Oh, the draft class. So the Winnipeg Jets took Sasha Boumedienne, NCAA, Boston College, left shot defenseman, was the youngest player in college hockey last season. He's 18 years old. Boston University, 13 points in 40 games played. He's a very shifty defenseman. At least that's what I'm seeing. He's a great skater. Like I said, 6'1", 175. And you saw a massive run of taller defensemen, taller players this year. I know the Jets' third-round pick, Victor Klingzel, mentioned that in his day one media availability at development camp, saying, a lot of taller players went, but I feel like even though I'm 5'10", this isn't a direct quote. This was the sense I got. Even though he's 5'10", he thinks he has a bit of a chip in his shoulder and can prove some stuff going forward. But what did you think of Sasha Boumedienne, first-round pick, 28th overall to the Winnipeg Jets list, a left shot defenseman who is a great skater, youngest player in college hockey last year?
Yeah, no, I think it's look, I'm glad that they picked a guy who can skate. I know, as silly as that sounds, the Winnipeg Jets across the board this year, 2 consistent factors that I saw in their draft picks is, 1, they picked guys who can skate, and 2 is they picked guys who were at the time of the draft the best player, if not one of the best players available. Mm-hmm. Very, very diverse in terms of what leagues they drafted from, diverse in terms of what positions they drafted, especially once you get out. I'm formulating a theory. No, just kidding. I'm formulating a really hot take in terms of what my exact number is. But outside of in any given year, on average, maybe the top 6 picks in the entire draft, all you should be doing is taking the best player available, because we know they're lottery tickets. We know that it all depends on how they develop, what you do with them, all these different factors. And there are so many question marks around young prospects. Think about you when you were 18 years old and how much, could change in your life, and so many factors and variables and how they impacted what happened over the next 2, 3, 4 years of your life. Take the best player available if you're, a draft. And I don't always think that you have to necessarily pick the highest risk, highest reward players. I get that, especially when you get to like rounds 5 and beyond. I always would say aim high and go for the guy, because even if you take a safe bet, the odds are still pretty slim that he ends up becoming much of an impact piece. But across the board, and it seems like it's pretty much the general consensus, Winnipeg Jets picked most of the best players that were on the board when they were on the clock, and that's all you can really ask for when you're keeping all of your picks, which I know not all of us were thrilled that they did. But if that's where you're at, then that's the way to do it. So I, no complaints on my end for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I share your thoughts on that. I mean, Shane Malloy was on Winnipeg Sports Talk or maybe that was yesterday. Yeah, it was yesterday, talking about the Sasha Boumedienne pick, and was saying, if this guy was playing in maybe a different league and was putting up a point a game, the style of player that he is, general managers might have fallen for it a little bit more and taken him a little bit higher. A lot of, the prospect experts did have him ranked a little bit higher than 28th. I was shocked to see him taken at 28th to the Jets and have him slide there. So again, the Jets have 2 elite left shot defensemen in Josh Morrissey and now with the emergence of Dylan Sandberg. But the thing is, you're not going to see Sacha Boumedienne with the Winnipeg Jets for the next 4 years at least. Like that's what late first round picks, that's their trajectory if they even make it to the NHL. So there's a lot there where people will see a left shot defenseman and think we're set there. What's the issue? But 3 or 4 years from now, they might not be as set as they are right now. And I think with Alphonse Frey and Boumedienne, they have 2 very similar puck moving fast, skate well defensemen who could make an impact at the NHL level. And were both high draft picks in back-to-back years. Anything else on the draft class list before?
I will say, I went on a rant years ago. Oh my God, a couple of weeks ago about exactly that, where it's like, okay, with him and Alphonse Frey, that's what draft and develop is all about, baby. If they don't become impact players for the Winnipeg Jets, that's fine. Turn them into actual assets and turn them into something that other teams are going to want. And all of a sudden, when Nikolai Ehlers walks from your team on free agency, you have some picks and prospects and pieces in the arsenal that you can just load up and bring someone else in via trade, which is how the Winnipeg Jets acquire a lot of their highest impact pieces. And there you go. Doesn't mean that Alphonse Frey or Sacha Boumedienne are going to become the ultimate number 1 left shot defenseman for the Winnipeg Jets, but turn them into something more valuable than they were when you first drafted them. And Bob's your uncle. That's what you're supposed to do with those guys.
Exactly. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about development camp and about the Winnipeg Jets prospects because we have a special guest joining us today, Lyss. Dave Manuk from Illegal Curve is going to hop on. Oh, he's sideways.
I'm sideways. Hold on.
Hold on, Dave.
Let me do
hasn't even left the rink yet.
I've not left the rink yet. What's going on, everyone?
Unbelievable. Dave Manuk from Illegal Curve, everybody. Dave, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. What's going on?
How is I saw you down at development camp, but how nice is it to get back to the rink and talk to some Winnipeg Jets prospects this week?
Well, I mean, it's nice that there's actually something to talk about as opposed to speculating and wasting,
That's what we've done for the first hour here. Just speculate. So
well, I'm glad I made the decision to come down here and not be at Canada Life right now. I can tell you that much right now. We got some good content. I hope my internet's okay.
It's working good.
All right. I'm getting a little.
It's great, and it looks like we actually have a Winnipeg Jets, as minor as it is, signing to talk about. But we got Elliot Friedge is saying that Cole Koepke is going to the Jets.
Cole Koepke. Sure. So Ken Wiebe was on this.
Ken Wiebe was on to something.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we've got a signing. Cole Koepke, left winger, 6'1", 207 pounds. Played with the Boston Bruins last year. 73 games played, 17 points. He is from Two Harbors, Minnesota, so very close to Manitoba. I guess, Dave, we can get your initial reaction to the Jets making a depth signing here.
Well, I mean, look, they need to add something, right? They need to add some players. Obviously, we've already seen Dylan Coghlan leave. I mean, he's a defenseman, obviously, but like you just wanted to see the Jets do something. I mean, I was joking around saying so far the only thing that's been reportable so far today has been the guys we've been talking to here at development camp, because there hasn't really been anything newsworthy. And obviously, as you guys have already talked about, Ehlers doesn't sound like it's happening anytime soon, right? So from that perspective, it's interesting how the Jets needed to get something done. They've added someone, and credit Kenny Wiebe. He was in on this one, and I think was it you, Connor, who was talking about that this morning. You had mentioned, yes. I think that Kenny had said that. So, I mean, look, you want to have competition at training camp. That's, to me, is the key. And so if this adds that, then that's great. I mean, but the reality for Jets fans, obviously, is right now the focus has to be on, like, where is that top 6 scoring going to be coming from? Because as obviously everyone knows, Brock Besser is staying in Vancouver. He was the plan A. Well, plan A is gone. Nikolai Ehlers, we don't know what's going on there. So, it's a bit of an unknown. And obviously adding depth when, like guys are you can have something like that, especially another member of the Minnesota Mafia. Not a bad thing, but I mean, it's definitely not very good what's going on in terms of that uncertainty on the second line.
Well, let me ask you about that, because Lyss and I, what we speculated about for the first hour here was how to replace Nikolai Ehlers in the aggregate. We're playing money ball here. We can't bring back Nikolai Ehlers. How do we bring him back through multiple pieces? Where are you looking in terms of it? whether it's a free agent, whether it's a trade acquisition, how do you see the best path forward for the Jets to replace Nikolai Ehlers if he is to walk? Is that a promote from within and hope for more out of some younger players? Where do you think the Jets will go and where they should go when it comes to Nikolai Ehlers, maybe potentially, likely, eventually leaving in free agency?
I think the answer is you don't. You don't.
You don't.
You
but
don't.
In the aggregate, you can.
Yeah, fine,
Yeah,
fair enough. I mean, look, I just think we talked about it on our show on Saturday. I mean, I think it's unrealistic to have an expectation that guys who are 6, 7, 8 years younger than Nikolai Ehlers, who don't have that level of experience, don't have that. I mean, he's played 600 games in the NHL.
Yeah.
He's got, he or whatever it was. I don't remember the exact number, but no, I think he was approaching 600 with the Jets. And so you just can't replicate that experience with guys like who I have all the time in the world for, a Nikita Chibrikov, a Brad Lambert, but they're not there yet, right? These are guys who are drafted 7 or 8 years after Ehlers. So they're guys who are learning to be pros. They're showing when they get their opportunities up with the Jets that they can play well. Again, like I said, Nikita Chibrikov, especially scoring, he's been productive from a scoring perspective. But yeah, I mean, I just think it's going to be a difficult task. And then, look, there's questions to guys like, an Andrew Mangiapane and I don't know if guys have signed because obviously, I'm paying attention, but I'm not 100% locked in because I was trying to get all the development camp stuff posted in the last little bit. But no, I mean, I think maybe I was going to say, well, originally we were talking about Jonathan Drouin, but we know he signed with the Islanders. So yeah, I don't know how you're going to do it. I mean, again, it may just be that the Jets don't score as much next year, and it's going to be redoubling in terms of a commitment to defense. But they were the best defensive team in the league the last 2 years and allowed the least amount of goals. So, but what we saw in the playoffs, as Drew reminded me this weekend, was that the Jets didn't. It wasn't that their defense lacked against Dallas; it's that they didn't score enough. So, I mean, and the other alternative is also that you maybe have to break up the wealth of riches with Scheifele and Velarde and Connor if you're not going to have, and then maybe kind of, whether it's an Alex Iafallo or someone else, but you have to maybe mix it up a little bit to get that second line of Velarde or someone who's got the hands that can help with Perfetti and have some ability in that regard. So to me, the only option really, if you can't replace Ehlers, you can't sign Ehlers, sorry, and obviously Besser is not an option. You can get a guy like Mangiapane who's shows that he can put the puck in the back of the net, and maybe your option is to remove a guy like Velarde from that top line to give the second line a little more scoring touch.
Okay, now we actually have an interesting Winnipeg Jets deal here. Tanner Pearson signs a 1-year, $1 million deal with the Winnipeg Jets. That's a fun one.
By the way, why is it that I was literally saying, I'm like, okay, I finished my media stuff. I can jump on with them. The Jets aren't doing anything, so I'm not going to have to worry about not being able to break news. And then I join you guys.
Dave is jumping off right now. He's like, guys, I got to go.
I'm not joking. I was kind of itching. I'm like, well, I haven't updated the website yet, so this is good. Okay, keep going. Sorry, Lyss, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay. But Tanner Pearson, it's a player. It's something
player.
A little bit more than a Cole Koepke. At least there's that. So does everyone? Connor, maybe I'll toss it to you right away. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, Tanner Pearson, I mean, very similar, I want to say, to Cole Koepke. Similar players, I'll say. Not similar. Cole Koepke has played only a couple of seasons, 3 seasons in the NHL. Tanner Pearson has played since 2012 with the LA Kings. He won a Stanley Cup in 2013 with the Kings. But last year with the Vegas Golden Knights, 78 games played, 27 points, 12 goals, 1 point in 8 playoff games. So, a depth signing, another player that can compete for a role in the Jets' bottom 6. And again, I'm pretty sure I said it to begin this show. The Winnipeg Jets aren't really after the big fishes in free agency. They're more after these depth signings. So between Cole Koepke and Tanner Pearson, I see that as very similar. And Dave, I'll just get your thoughts on Tanner Pearson as well, since you talked about Koepke, and I'm sure much of the same can be said, but more of a veteran presence for Tanner Pearson.
Yeah, I mean, look, it never hurts to have experience in your lineup, and that's kind of like the whole Jonathan Toews thing. Like, we don't know what level Jonathan Toews is going to be at, and again, whatever level he's going to be at in training camp is going to be vastly different, I suspect, than what he's going to look like come playoff time or even by the midpoint of the season. And I just think that there is a tremendous amount of value to having guys who have the know-it-all to, we've been there, done that, as opposed to guys on this team who, again, they've had a lot of regular season success, but not that they haven't been able to replicate it in the playoffs. So, and we've seen with whether it's Florida or Vegas or Washington, teams need to kind of go through that experience of losing before they get to that winning.
For sure.
Now, again, it's not going to be easier when you lose a guy like Ehlers and you're not replacing what he can do. Because, I mean, again, even though Ehlers has not been a 100-point guy, not that the Jets have ever had a 100-point guy, but not that he's been a guy who's even gotten to 70, 80, or 90. But the fact of the matter is that he's a guy who is, with limited center depth on that second line, produced a lot on his own, right? So now, again, you're asking guys to this. I mean, to me, this is just another signaling that you're going to turn that bot. And again, I don't mind it. I don't have a problem with the bottom six having competition and not just handing the keys to guys and saying, okay, well, we know that it's going to be for sure Jared Anderson-Dolan, or it's going to be for sure Parker Ford, or whomever it's going to be. Nikita Chibrikov. You're going to make these guys work for it. Obviously, there's guys who are waiver exempt. But yeah, I mean, bringing guys in, especially, one of the things we like to say is no such thing as a bad 1-year deal. So, especially when the number is like that. So you bring him in, you put him in the mix, and you see where it goes from there.
If it doesn't work out, Tanner Pearson is a guy who could probably get value at the deadline too. I know that's probably looking a little bit too far ahead, but I agree with you there on the no such bad thing as a 1-year deal. Lyss, I'll let you ask the next question here.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if this is the type of show where it's like, oh, I had a question that I was going to ask Dave, and then I was like, psych, Tanner Pearson, let's talk about that right away. But we'll derail from this conversation just a little bit, just because obviously, as we can tell by Dave's background, and like we said, spent the good chunk of the morning here at Dev Camp, and we had some bleak insights on the Nikolai Ehlers situation, how tough that one is for the Winnipeg Jets, tough reality. But there's some exciting stuff to talk about for the Winnipeg Jets, and then future's looking pretty nice over down at Hockey for All Center. So maybe if we want to pivot the conversation to that until I inevitably cut you off again when the Winnipeg Jets do sign you sooner. But Dave, just give us kind of your blanket thoughts. I already sort of shared with everyone some brief hits from the public media availability we had this morning with Kevin He, Jacob Julien, and Alphonse Frey. But just kind of your thoughts on your guy Klingcell there, and then maybe some of the other players that you saw this morning that are out at camp and that you're having a fun time covering there down at Hockey for All.
It's funny you should mention that, because I was joking around with you two, and as we were watching, and I said, well, maybe make Victor Klingcell your guy to watch, Connor, your breakout player. And I'm not joking. You two left, and he pulled this crazy move and scored just an absolute beauty goal. And I laughed to Jamie Thomas and Paul Edmonds, who were sitting to my left, because I said, of course, those guys leave right after the guy I said, keep your eye on, makes an incredible move and gets the crowd oohing and eyeing.
Sure he did, Dave. Let's get you back to bed.
Jamie Thomas and Paul Edmonds will both back me up on that. So no, I mean, it was a good day at development camp. It's obviously yesterday we just did media. Today was a chance to see these guys skate for the first time, and you can really see, like, Kevin He's motor never stops.
Oh, man.
I mean, it is unbelievable. We know that he had a really good season. I asked him in the media availability, because when he was recalled, he didn't get officially recalled. He just came to Winnipeg and kind of hung out with the Moose for the weekend. Didn't get into any games, and turned out he had a lower body injury, which I kind of had an idea as to, because I watched his exit meetings in Niagara, and they kind of alluded to the idea that he was dealing with some injury issues. So he didn't, of course, join the team officially. He just kind of came and was around the team for a weekend. But he just, again, he's just a player who you just it's going to be very exciting to watch what he does next year back with Niagara. He talked about the making playoffs for the first time in 6 years with the Ice Dogs. And so, how that meant a lot. That was their goal. His first year being the captain of the team. So, he's a player that I think, like I said, he has a tremendous amount of upside. Jacob Julian's a guy who and I'm not going to pretend that I watch these guys in depth. Obviously I don't, but I definitely pay attention to what they're doing during the year. And he was a guy who, his points decreased, but I mean, he was on such a juggernaut London team that he was behind a lot of guys in the lineup, but he still got a lot of opportunity, and he addressed that idea. I talked to him about it. I said, points aren't everything, but just in terms of your sort of decrease from your points, but your two-way game, how did that sort of improve? And he basically said, like, that was his focus, his play away from the puck and his opportunity in that regard. And, he's playing under the Hunter brothers. I mean, this London team was insane. I mean, they lost one game in the playoffs, I think, to Colby Barlow and the Oshawa Generals. And other than that, they steamrolled through the OHL playoffs. And obviously they ended up winning the Memorial Cup. So he talked about how important that was. He's obviously a guy who's from London and then wins in his hometown. Talked about watching the 2016 Knights team, not Golden Knights, but not regular Knights. And again, I just think like he's a guy who's getting ready to turn pro. So he's one who's going to be worth watching. And then, Alphonse Frey, I mean, again, I'm definitely not going to pretend like I watch Swedish hockey other than the occasional highlight. And he just talked about, jumping leagues and dealing with obviously a little adversity in terms of injury. But, he's excited and obviously was very excited about all the Swedish additions to the to the draft pool. But no, I mean, there, it's always a good time. This is the best time of the year, right? The draft is my favorite, and then obviously development camp is a lot of fun too because you get to watch these kids kind of see how they've taken that next step in the progression.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the draft there being your favorite time of the year. Let me ask you about Sacha Boumedienne specifically.
Yeah.
Say that 3 times fast. 28th overall pick, youngest player in college hockey last year. 6'1", 175-pound left shot defenseman who, by all accounts on the scouting reports, is an incredible skater, incredible puck mover.
Yeah.
And a lot of scouts or prospect experts, I should say, were maybe shocked that he slid to 28. What did you think of that pick at that spot, Dave? The Jets taking another, left shot defenseman like Alphonse Frey last year.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because again, as you said, we're not prospect experts, right? We watch the kids that are in the prospect pool, but we don't necessarily know the kids who are the next thing. And we try and do our research just before the draft gets going, but really ultimately you don't have a tremendous amount of insight on what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. I mean, in fact, we may have seen him play against Zach Naring, the third rounder in the Frozen Four, but ultimately, I can't imagine anyone was like, that guy for BU is really, really caught my eye. Now you may have, but not because, of course, you had any particular insight that the Jets were going to draft him. But you know what I mean? Again, from what I've read and what I seem to understand is that had he played in the USHL last year rather than playing in the NCAA, his points would have been a lot higher. And a lot of people seem to think that he would have been probably like in the mid-teens as a draft pick, as opposed to where he was. And even when we had Craig Button on Illegal Curve 3 weeks ago, Craig told us, Craig had him on his Craigslist at 28. But what's interesting is that he didn't, when he told us, and as he asked them about it, he basically said, well, I don't anticipate he'll still be there for the Jets at 28. That's just what I thought he might go. But ultimately, of course, that's where he ended up going. But Craig was of the opinion he would have been long gone by the time Winnipeg selected him. And that's just the way lists are, right? People have whatever they have. And if someone goes off the board, takes a goalie unexpectedly, I think, which was 20th, right, by Columbus. So then you have something where kind of the list kind of changed. But clearly the Jets were very happy to get him. And from what we're seeing, we have we had him on our show on Saturday and he was really excited. He's excited to go to a place that wanted him. And the interesting insight that we learned from Victor Klingsell yesterday was that, first of all, Boumedienne was a center back in Sweden, which none of us knew. He said he had a propensity for scoring goals. And then just also that their fathers had played pro hockey together at some invitational, I guess, back home in Sweden. So they've actually been friends since they were kids. So there's a little connectivity between Klingsell and Boumedienne.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I will say the comment you made there on, not knowing if that player would be available because of how the draft board fell out. Every scout that we had on WST or prospect expert, I keep saying scout, same sort of thing. They all said that after pick 15, after pick 20, it was really wide open in terms of the players and the different ways that each team could go. So I saw some rankings that had Boumedienne much higher than 28. I saw some that had him in the 30s. I saw some that had him in the 40s as well. So it's all, every team has their list. And I, for one, was just a little shocked to see the Jets go left shot defenseman again after taking Alphonse Frey. They did have a run of forwards there for a couple of years as well in the first round or in the early rounds at least. But yeah, Lyss, I'll let you ask Dave. Maybe the last question here. I know he's got to update illegalcurve.com. The website's always the latest. Yes.
I was starting to get the Joneses. I was like, okay, how much longer?
We'll give you one more question and then you can hop over to illegalcurve.com and get all the latest Jets news. But Lyss,
appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, just maybe last thing, if you have any comments on any of the free agent invites that were sent, brought to camp. Obviously, we're familiar with some of the draft picks. If there's anything that you can, share with the class, if you will, on some of the maybe lesser known names that are in this prospect pool that are here this week at Hockey for All.
Are you talking about the guys who are actually in the Jets prospect pool, or guys who are invited to be
guys
here?
Who were invited just to be here this week?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm going to be absolutely candid. I have absolutely no idea. Like, I can't, I as I said to you guys earlier today, I was disappointed no Mad Max Nemestikov invited this year. But no, I mean, like, again, my focus, generally speaking, I mean, I'm definitely interested, especially because I know there's a guy who plays for the Niverville Nighthawks who was invited. So there's definitely you want to get to know a little bit of the Manitoba element, and those are the additional stories. But to me, those are usually day 4 or 5 stories. So I haven't really gotten into kind of getting to those ones just quite yet.
Yeah, well, we'll see you down at development camp this week, Dave. It runs through till Friday. Right. A lot of Jets prospects, a lot of Moose prospects eventually, maybe this season for some of those players as well. So really looking forward to seeing all the coverage you have on illegalcurve.com. Thanks for taking the time today, despite the signings that happened right when you hopped on. We'll bring you back on in 30 minutes. They'll make 2 more signings.
All right. Sounds good, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. All right. There goes Dave Manuk from Illegal Curve. Really appreciate him taking the time today outside of his busy schedule to join us here on the Winnipeg Sports Talk Free Agency special. And hey, if you're here with us live on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button down below. We would really appreciate it. Lyss, do we want to get right into our segments, or do you just maybe a quick word on the 2 signings before we get there? Cole Koepke and
I have no words. So
you have no words? You don't have a theory?
Hey,
what is this? I thought you'd have a Cole Koepke theory, but anyways.
Oh no, a Tanner Pearson theory for sure. That Vancouver Canuck, but no, I'm just kidding. No, like listen, I think Tanner Pearson in particular I have a little bit more interest in, and I really like Dave's comments that he made about the whole idea of having some competition for the bottom 6 pieces. I understand that it's not helpful to have too many 4th line players in an organization. Things get clogged, you're wasting roster spots, whatever, but nobody should be guaranteed a spot on this team. And you know what, if they have 5 guys duking it out for those bottom 3 forward roles, okay, then we've just elevated what that 4th line is able to do. So I'm on board with it. Time will tell. We'll see what happens. I'll probably do a little bit of internet sleuthing over the next little bit on some Cole Koepke and Tanner Pearson for sure before I give my final assessment. But they're interesting deals, I guess. We'll go with that.
Sure. I mean, yeah, like I said, T. Will said, if I hear the Jets have signed a depth player one more time, I'm going to barf. The Jets have signed 2 depth players here. So that's really all that could be taken away here. I am interested. Cole Koepke, 27 years old, had 10 goals in a 4th line role with the Boston Bruins, and just went over and took a peek at Jay Fresh's card of him, which always is, a good summary of what a player is good at. And his even strength defense is 90%. And again, very depth role, but if he can be a quality defensive, 4th line player who can add 10 goals, again, this by no means is the Nikolai Ehlers replacement. Cole Koepke is playing next to Mark Scheifele next year on the top line or anything like that. But it's a depth signing, and I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued for both of these. Tanner Pearson obviously is more of a veteran, 32 years old, has been around the league with the Kings, the Penguins, the Canucks, the Canadiens, the Golden Knights, and now with the Winnipeg Jets on a 1-year, $1 million deal, as the Jets look to, replenish a little bit of their forward core and their depth. Anything else, Lyss? I see.
I'm just laughing. Hermantown, Minnesota is a 45-minute drive from Two Harbors, where Cole Koepke is from. So there we go.
Nice. I'm Elias saying intrigued. Really, I'm as intrigued as I can be for a 4th line depth signing. Cole Koepke, that is. Tanner Pearson, we know what he is. He's a veteran, but Cole Koepke had 10 goals as a 4th liner last year. So I want to see it. I want to see it. But we'll see. We shall see. These are signings that, like I said, aren't going to move the needle if Ehlers is gone, but they are depth signings nonetheless, and they are a training camp battle to watch for, at least up front. Well, Lyss, we've gone long enough without bringing up our segments. And again, this might be new for some people. We've got 240 people here with us on YouTube. We really appreciate it. Make sure you hit the like button. We do both of these segments every single Sunday morning. So if you're not already a regular, hit the notification bell. We go live every single Sunday morning. Let's go to Trending Up, Trending Down List. This is a segment where we pick one Winnipeg Jets player who has been trending up or down over the past week. Now, there haven't been any games for a month and a half now, 2 months. So this has gotten a bit tougher, but here we are on free agency day. We are still going to make our picks for trending up, trending down. And like I said, if you're here with us on YouTube, thanks for joining us. Make sure you hit the chat room and drop your picks down below for trending up, trending down, one player or a coach or a GM, if you think one way or the other. Whatever you want it to be, one player trending up or trending down. Lyss, I'll let you go first here on the free agency special edition of Trending Up, Trending Down.
Oh boy. Okay. Trending up, I am going to have to go with crazy off the board pick, Kyle Connor. Okay, just bear with me for a second here.
Okay, interested to hear.
Connor and I were talking about this a little bit this morning and stuff in terms of this landscape of free agents that we're signing right now. I'm not going to repeat myself from earlier in the show, but this is a very, very unfamiliar situation in terms of cap efficiency, blah, 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 scoring at a premium, all these different things. Kyle Connor doesn't grow on a tree. We've said this before. We'll say it again. And I think watching some of these deals get signed today, as expected, the price tag on Kyle Connor's next contract is only going to continue to go up. So obviously that extension window is now open. So we could see a Kyle Connor extension anytime, over the next year. And I think that his AAV is going to only get higher, if not lower. A couple weeks ago, Connor and I were saying, maybe we're looking at I think we're pretty comfortably looking at the first Winnipeg Jet to make over 10 million in AAV. That's for sure. But the further we get along the road here, we might get closer to 11 or something like that. So he's my trending up pick, a guy that I don't know why this is the route we're going today, but me, I like to go off the board. So that's what we'll go with.
It's a good trending up pick for the cap reasons. I'm going to go with one that we mentioned off the top of the show when we were talking about a lot of defensive contracts. I'm going to take Dylan Samberg, who I think, maybe during the season, a lot of us were thinking maybe in that $5.5, $6 million range. I think the contracts that have been handed out these past couple of days has raised Dylan Samberg's contract and the annual average value that he's going to get on an 8-year deal. If they decide to go 8 years, that is going to be a much higher number than I think we all initially thought. So I'm going to go Dylan Samberg's next contract trending up. Cole Koepke and Tanner Pearson could also, be a pick for trending up because the Winnipeg Jets did just sign them both. Now let's get to, and Darth Skater with the best pick here, Hrabchak's status as a WST insider. Great pick, Darth Skater, who's always there Sundays at 9 a.m. We appreciate that. Now, Lyss, your pick for trending down.
Oh, I got to go with Kenny Holland. I got to go with Kenny Holland as my trending down pick. I think as the day wraps up and then maybe some more names go off the board, it's been quiet for the last few minutes, but I think we've seen a lot of what today has to offer. And I think in terms of the day's winners and losers, not a fan of what the LA Kings have done. So I think the Joel Armia, Corey Perry, it is what it is. But that Cody Ceci deal, I'm with the Brian Dumoulin deal, I'm not liking too much. So I'm going to go with Kenny Holland as my loser of the day.
Nice. I like that. My trending down pick is going to be Nikita Chibrikov because the Winnipeg Jets just signed Cole Koepke and Tanner Pearson, both depth forwards who I think could block a Nikita Chibrikov type in that forward core. So again, going a little off the board here. Not really, but a little off the board. I'm going to go Nikita Chibrikov because he's a player. I think I said it last Sunday, which I shouldn't have, or 2 Sundays ago, which I should not have because I should have waited for free agency. But I had to take that. I think Nikita Chibrikov has the highest likelihood of any of the Jets prospects to make next year's team. And I still believe that. But man, like with Jared Henderson, Dolan, Cole Koepke, Tanner Pearson, all of these, veteran depth forwards that are going to be in that battle in training camp, I think it's going to be a lot easier for the Jets just to send Chibrikov down to the Moose for another year and keep these NHL players that they signed to NHL contracts. And so I think that's my pick. I think Darth Skater doesn't like it.
We do quite like to galaxy brain these takes, and I like that about this segment. It's really fun. There are always some easy ones that we could take, but it's like, how could we just go so many different routes with this and then derivative. And I love it. So I think that's a great pick. Good job.
Yeah. Coach Rennie here saying Chibi plays right wing. They are lefts. I will say Chibrikov's also left-handed. I know he's played some right wing as well. And one thing that's interesting here, Cole Koepke and Tanner Pearson, both left shot forwards. So the Jets are just stacking them up. They don't need right shot forwards. They're attempting to build a forward core full of 12 left shot forwards. Well, I guess Mark Scheifele is definitely staying, and Gabe Vilardi as well as an RFA. But man, they have so many left shot forwards, and these two players, depth forwards, are also left shot. So that is something to note if you care about that sort of thing. But I'm going to take Nikita Chibrikov trending down as my pick because I think these signings could block him from a roster spot on opening night in 2025. That was trending up or trending down. Thank you, everyone, for taking part in the chat below. We really appreciate it. And like we said before, make sure you hit the like button as well. And we are going to be getting out of here. We're not going till 3:30 like, Huss and Remo do every single day, Monday to Friday. All of you are always here for that. We don't have as much Jets news here. And unless Nikolai Ehlers, maybe re-signs this afternoon, that would be great. We're going to be getting out of here relatively soon. But before we do that, Lyss, we need to get to one burning question, which is our other segment. This is the segment where if you have joined us here live on YouTube, this is your time to shine. We're going to throw it to the chat room and ask for a ton of questions. We're going to try and rapid fire through as many as we can before we end the show today. So if you're here with us live on YouTube, make sure you hit the chat room and drop your one burning question down below. Like I said, we're going to rapid fire through them. So get to the chat room immediately. It could be anything regarding the Winnipeg Jets, and we will answer it. One burning question segment starts now. And Lyss, my one burning question to you is, which of Dylan Samberg and Gabriel Vilardi signs first? If you had to guess.
I'm going to go with Dylan Samberg. I think Dylan Samberg is someone that the Winnipeg Jets are going to want to go long-term with him, and I don't see the player having really any reservations with that. I understand that it's like, okay, you take the shorter bridge and maybe the AAV goes up, whatever. I think this is a guy who the Winnipeg Jets would probably be happy to slightly overpay for a longer term deal to give some control to this asset for the foreseeable future. Gabe Vilardi, I think this one could go so many different ways. I really do. So I think Dylan Samberg gets done first. What do you think?
I'll go with you on that. And for the reasons you mentioned there, I think he's going to go longer term. We've talked before as well. We think Gabe Vilardi's more of a bridge deal kind of guy, which, could take a little bit longer. Like Cole Perfetti bled all the way into training camp last year. That might not happen in terms of a Gabe Vilardi negotiation. Definitely, I don't see that really happening for Dylan Samberg. So I'll go with Samberg as well. Let's get to the one burning questions in the chat. What is going to happen with Mason Appleton? Bardot asks. Lyss.
I'm so devastated that we haven't had an Appleton deal to talk about here on the show. That was what I was banking on. I had a couple things in my back pocket. Yeah, we were going to talk about the Isaac Phillips qualifying offer.
Just clarify. You're devastated that we're not talking about a Mason Appleton contract elsewhere?
Correct. 31 options of different Mason Appleton contracts that we're not talking about here on the show. This is a player that will not be a Winnipeg Jet in a week. I can tell you that much for free. It'll be interesting to see what happens because this is an NHL player. I will give him that for sure. But what's going to happen with him? 3x3 somewhere. I think he's going to be one of those deals that we're going to look back on in a year and say, wow, that's a peak July 1st, 2025 deal where it's a bottom six utility guy who other teams, again, grass is always greener. They're like, oh, there's some upside here. We could take this guy, give him a little bit of term because, especially those guys who have bounced around on single or double 2-year deals, whatever. I think the longest deal Mason Appleton's ever signed is a 3-year deal. So giving him a little bit more of that stability with his young family and stuff, I think he'd probably be open to that. So I think I could see that happening somewhere. I don't know where. This is a deal that I think most teams can afford, that most teams might, they would be able to service in some way. So I don't have a short list in terms of where I think he's going to go, but he's going to hit the open market and play for one of 31 non-Winnipeg Jets teams. And I think it's probably going to be close to, I would be shocked if the deal was too far under a 8-figure deal, in the sense of I could see him signing a $10 million deal somewhere. And looking at it as a steep overpay, I'd be shocked if it was a ton more than that, but I think it's probably going to be somewhere in that range.
And not in AAV, of course, in total value on that contract.
No,
course,
I do not think that Mason Appleton is going to make $10 million next year.
10 million
You can put me on the record saying that if you want.
Some of the contracts. No, I'm kidding. That is not going to happen. But yeah, I'm with you on that. I would have thought Utah would be a place for Appleton, but they just signed Brandon Tanev.
They already got their
deal, so they got the other
exile. So
the other Jet UFA. So yeah, I don't know. I agree with you there that I think he's going to sign maybe a 3-4 year deal somewhere, and the price in terms of AAV might shock some people. And I don't think it'll be in Winnipeg either. 10A City saying, does the regular season really matter if you make the playoffs? I think there have been teams over the past couple of years that have disproven the importance of the regular season. This past year, everyone, when Florida won the cup again, we're talking about how they were one of the best teams of the Cap era. They were a 3 seed in the Atlantic. They didn't have home ice advantage in the first round against the Tampa Bay Lightning. So in that sense, no. But I mean, like, a President's Trophy is nothing to scoff at. A Central Division title's nothing to scoff at. Like, those things do matter, and those are real accomplishments for a team. But if you're a veteran team that has been there, done that in the playoffs, I do think you can coast through the regular season. And I think you're going to see that for many years with Florida because they did it last year. It worked for them. They won the cup. They looked incredible in the playoffs. And I don't know if you agree with that list, but there are certain teams that can coast in the regular season and certain teams that can't.
I mean, you have to prove it first, right? I think there's a lot that you can't just walk in and make, like, what do you want to say, that the next regular season doesn't matter for the Montreal Canadiens because they made the playoffs, and if they make the playoffs again, no, it's so a case by case basis, and it's a very nuanced conversation to me. So maybe my response isn't going to be the best for a one burning question segment, but I have said this 1,000 times, and I'll say it for the 1,001st time right now. I can't throw away 82 games for a sample of 5 to 12. Like, I really can't. So We'll see. It really depends on what you do in that playoff stretch, how long it is, how consistent it is, what happens in that. But the regular season matters for a reason. And I think that you can learn a lot about how players work together, what your internal solutions are to different problems when they come up, whether it's different systems you face, different forechecks, how you manage. And it just matters if you can perform in those situations and utilize all of that flexibility and agility in the actual playoffs.
Agreed. Yeah. So next question here from both Coach Rennie and Leslie Mitchnick, both asking about Jonathan Toews and whether or not he can be the second line center. And Leslie asks, who outside of Toews can realistically be the Jets' second line center if it's not Toews? So, Liz, your thoughts on Toews being a 2C? I know we talked about this a few weeks ago. If it's not Toews, who else can realistically maybe slide in there?
I think there are so many questions around this particular topic, especially because of the Lowry injury as well, where the whole thing before is that when Adam Lowry is playing, does your second line center actually need to be your second line center, or can you do some movement, whatever, because of the amount of minutes that Adam Lowry munches and what situations he's used in, blah, blah, blah. I am genuinely curious to see how the Winnipeg Jets tackle the middle of the ice for this first stretch here. Morgan Barron, I think, is going to get a longer leash at center here. I think we are going to see him get tried out, whether it's in as a placeholder for Adam Lowry or maybe even with some higher end players on the Winnipeg Jets just to see what he's capable of doing. Cole Perfetti and Gabe Vilardi both, in my opinion, have kind of been written off internally as being center candidates for this 2C role, for the center position, frankly, as a whole. So I don't know. I really don't know. And I'm fascinated. I also think I could almost throw Brad Lambert into that camp. I don't see Brad Lambert playing meaningful center minutes in the NHL for the very, very, foreseeable future, maybe in a couple of years or whatnot, but definitely not in October. I can tell you right now, Brad Lambert's not the 2C in October. So I don't know. I really, really don't know. I think that's something that they still need to try and solve externally. I really do.
Yeah. And what I said a few weeks ago on Toews, and I'll say it again now, is I got to see it. Like, can he be the second line center? I don't think any of us really know. And you got to wait till training camp. Like, we can all sit here and say, I know that Jonathan Toews is, going to be his 30-year-old self again, and he's going to put up 80 points next year, but you don't know. And you could also,
and in the same breath that you're like, he's old and he's going to be a bust, you don't know anything about Jonathan Toews. There's nothing that any of us know about what Jonathan Toews is going to do.
Yeah. So I'm reserving thought until I see him on the ice at training camp, skating around with other NHL players compared to other NHL players. And that first 2-month stretch of the season is going to be very interesting with no Adam Lowry. And obviously Nemesnikov, who was the second line center all year last year, Matt Hyman notes, I think is the prime candidate to be the 2C to start the year. And then with Taves as the 3C, filling in the Adam Lowry role to at least start the season. Morgan Barron's going to get more minutes. Maybe Taves is the 4C to get Barron in at 3C. The Jets are going to be thin down the middle to start the year if Jonathan Taves can't play at a second line center level. And that, like I said, is to be seen. And I'm going to reserve my thought on that. Here's another question. How do the Jets make an impact trade at the deadline using their prospects, who they themselves likely won't trust to play fourth line minutes over Pearson or Koepke? So could you see the Jets doing that, Lyss? Moving
yeah, no, that's a good question. I think, that this is the draft and develop conversation that I keep having, where it's like, that's the hope, is that you can turn all of your depth pieces into valuable assets that, come trade deadline time. We saw it again, and that's one thing that every year when we see a team try and be a little bit more like the Stanley Cup winner of the previous season, I think this year kind of reset the trade market in terms of you can bring in high impact pieces at the trade deadline and they can do well for your team. And with Seth Jones and Brad Marchand as the namely acquisitions there, I think if that's the route that people want to go, and especially with the Winnipeg Jets right now looking like depth is not going to be as much of a concern as top end talent, try and let Nikita Chibrikov and Brad Lambert and Colby Barlow and all these guys cook as much as you can, develop them. And so, I think that the Winnipeg Jets absolutely could do that. Will they? I don't know, because the Winnipeg Jets don't really like trading prospects. It's not a thing that they really do. They'll trade a lot of picks before they'll trade prospects. So I'm not certain, but at the end of the day, it's assets in, assets out. And if you can, find a way to, bring in a really, really high impact piece for just some guy who was a former 4th round pick that ended up having a good season, hey, all the power to you. So I'm really not sure how to answer this question.
Yeah. I think I'm with you on that, because like you said, the Jets aren't typically a team that trades their prospects. So it would be a change for them if they did, but players like Koepke and Pearson and Anderson Dolan filling in on these bottom 6 roles does give them the flexibility to trade, a player, a prospect that would be coming up and playing in the bottom 6 for an impact player higher up in the lineup, which again, if Dylan Sandberg signs, the Jets have 9 defensemen as well. They're not going to carry 9 going into the season. So either Ville Heinola is going to hit waivers or they're going to make a trade of some kind. These are things that are going to happen. Clearly they're not happening today, or they haven't happened yet today for the Winnipeg Jets, but July 1 is typically a very, very quiet day for Winnipeg. And with just the 2 depth signings, it looks like we're headed towards the same thing. Darth Skater, anything changing with an 84 game schedule, like more division games? It's my understanding that right now you play every team in your division 4 times, except for 2 that you play 3 times. And they're just adding so that you play every single division team 4 times. So there won't be, like this past season, the Jets only played the Wild 3 times. And that was, dumb because that's their biggest rival. So they're eliminating that. I'm not a big fan of the 84 game schedule. I don't think we need more games. I'm a fan of the shortened preseason. I'm a fan of more division games. If the NHL is going to make the division matter this much more for playoff seeding and all of those things. But that is the change with the 84 game schedules. You're just going to play your division 2 more times. And there won't be any teams that you play less than the other one. Turd, we misunderstood his question. Apparently the Jets assets are rotting. What team sees our prospects as valuable when we ourselves won't promote them over the players we sign? So that is the question list. Does your thoughts change much at all?
Yeah. I mean, I understand that's exactly what the thing is that right now, when you draft a player, what you're supposed to do is bring said player into the organization and boost their value so that either they're contributing to your team or they're worth more on the trade market than the initial pick was. And I agree with Turd Ferguson in the sense that right now, a lot of the young players in the Jets organization are not worth any more than they were when they first started with the team. When, right now, most of their young players, and we talked about this when we were, in the early off season, where it's like right now, what's worth more to a team that's looking to trade the Winnipeg Jets 1st round draft pick or Brad Lambert? If your answer is not Brad Lambert, that means you haven't been developing Brad Lambert to his full capacity, because that's a player that should be worth more than a 1st rounder. So I completely understand it. And the Winnipeg Jets, look, I don't think that prospects need to play NHL minutes in order to be perceived as valuable to teams externally, but we need to see more from basically every prospect in the Winnipeg Jets system if we want them to be valuable trade chips in high impact leverage trades.
And here's my thing also with prospects. Okay, Brad Lambert's the second line center next year because you want to promote from within, and he puts up 60 points. You gonna move him? Well, he's good. He's a good young player then. Is it, you try and trade him for an impact player? Is it either he's an impact player or he's not? And if you bring up
That's
Nikita
why I don't believe in like
Chibikov,
showcasing prospects in NHL minutes or whatever. It's like showcase them in situations that you can actually,
If you play Nikita Chibikov on Adam Lowry's wing and he finishes the season with 7 points and he plays 82 games, then you bled a lot of games because you're playing this player, and then he loses his value anyways. So prospects are taken where they're taken. And the GMs around the league will value them differently. I don't really see how not playing them changes their value. Brad Lambert had like 4 goals in the AHL this year. That is something that will change his value, not coming into the NHL and playing well or not. So I don't know. I just don't see how the Jets not playing their prospects hurts their value to the outside market. I don't think it does. Maybe it does. Maybe that's why they don't trade their prospects as much. But the Jets like to use their prospects, and if the prospects hit, then you keep them. Or else we'd be talking about trading Cole Perfetti going into the final year of his contract, who's an NHL player at this point in time. So that's going to do it for One Burning Question. Thank you, everyone who submitted questions in the chat below. And we're going to get out of here. This has been a long stream. Lyss and I usually go for about an hour every single Sunday morning from about 9 to 10. If you haven't joined us on a Sunday morning, please do. Thank you for joining us on this special Canada Day Tuesday edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Went live at 1 o'clock, dipping out here at 2:45. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Make sure you hit the like button on the way out. And Lyss, any final words before we say bye to all of the great WSTers with us today in chat?
Yeah, I think there's potential for there still to be some exciting things to happen over the rest of the day and the next few days as well. And if you have some free time this week, go down to HFA and go check out Jets Dev Camp. It's always a fun time. It's a free activity, something to do. Good viewing. There's lots of seats, lots of see the Jets today, as Dave Manuk always says.
Yes.
So there's a lot of fun going on at the Hockey for All Center just outside the city over the next Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday with some on-ice sessions with all those kids. So make sure you head out there and check that out because it's going to be a blast. And yeah, we're here most Sundays. We'll definitely be here every Sunday when the season starts up and kind of on an ad hoc basis for the rest of the summer. But Connor and I have a blast on Sundays. And, obviously if you folks are regulars on the big show here, you'll have seen yesterday that Connor shared with everyone that he's going to be with WST full time for the next stretch here, which is so awesome. So there's going to be a lot more where this came from. We have a blast. We love talking with you guys, with Huss and Remo, with the whole crew down at Hockey for All, down at Canada Life Center, and everyone online about all things Winnipeg Jets hockey. So that's what you can always expect from us.
Yes, absolutely. If you missed the big signing yesterday, I'm beyond excited and thrilled to be full-time with Winnipeg Sports Talk now. You'll see more Jets content when we get into the regular season. I'll be down at practice every day doing practice reports. You'll see some Bomber content starting like ASAP. The Bombers' next game is Thursday night against the Calgary Stampeders. I'll be doing some more videos on the WST channel for that as well. And we've got a ton more great stuff planned going into next season for the Winnipeg Jets. More shows like this with Lyss and I. And I could not be more excited to be with Winnipeg Sports Talk. These past 2 years have been so much fun with Huss and Remo. Them taking a chance on me and me being full-time with them now is honestly a dream come true, coming right out of school and working with them. So I'm beyond excited to start next season, this season today. This is my first day of work, stat holiday, starting right now. It still doesn't feel real, but yeah, really appreciate everyone joining us live today. Special for us. I know it's just another weekday at 1 p.m. for all of you, but we still really appreciate it. And Huss and Remus will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m., their normal time, Wednesday, with Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Join them to see the latest on Nikolai Ehlers, any more Jets signings, any more Jets news. But until then, enjoy the rest of your Canada Day. Thank you for joining us, and we will catch you all tomorrow, 1 o'clock, Winnipeg Sports Talk, Huss and Remus, WST Daily. Have a good one, everyone.